Are you ready to learn TanStack Form? In this video, I will be teaching you how to harness the power of TanStack Form to build robust, user-friendly forms in your web applications. TanStack Form is the ultimate solution for handling forms. It offers a powerful and flexible approach to form management with first-class TypeScript support and headless UI components, all while remaining framework agnostic. But why would you actually choose TanStack Form over something like React Hook Form? Well, most web frameworks don't provide a comprehensive solution for form handling, leaving you to either build your own custom implementation or rely on libraries that don't actually meet your needs. This often results in inconsistent behavior, performance issues, and extra development time. TanStack Form is the new library on the block, and it addresses these challenges head-on by offering an all-in-one solution that empowers you to handle reactive data binding, state management, complex validation, and error handling. Before we get into the video, if you could please leave a like and subscribe, I would massively appreciate it. So let's dive in. Okay everyone, so in order for me to explain to you guys how to set up TanStack Form inside of your application, we need to actually have a form in which we want to implement TanStack Form inside of it. So I have here a component. It is a simple registration form. You can see it's called register form. If you want to play around with the same component, I'm going to be posting the repo for this in the description. So in this component, we have a form, and I have an interface for the fields in the form. So the form requires us to add a user to register their information, and it asks for a lot of different type of information, which I think is good because it will help show you guys how to validate all of those different fields. So we have a username, an email, a first name, a last name, the age, the birth date, a Boolean for whether the person is married or not, a nationality, which is important because I only put 4 different options, so we need to make sure that what the user inputs is one of those options, and a password and a confirm password field. So in this example over here, I set up a component which doesn't have any validation. It is basically just a form, as you can see, with all of the inputs, all of the labels, and in the end, there is a button, which is the submit button, where you can click on it, and all it's going to do is it's just going to alert a stringified version of the form data. So if you were to actually use this, you'll see that I can put whatever I want over here, other than the email, because the email field is already kind of validated when you make it into an actual email field in the input. Now for the other stuff, I can put whatever I want. I could put my age to be -10, and that would allow. I'll also put in a random age over here for my birth date. I'll say I'm from Canada, and I'll put passwords that aren't even the same. And if I click register, you can see that it did register. So it did actually submit the form. If this was a real API that we were calling and sending data to, this would be obviously horrible because we need to validate what the user is inputting so that we send correct data to the backend and actually notify the user if they inputted something that doesn't make sense, like the age being negative. In this example, we want to actually validate this form for a couple different checks. So the first check is we want to make sure that the username field is not empty when we submit. We want to make sure that the email corresponds to an email, that the first and last name are not empty. We also want to make sure that the age is over 18 because I'm going to make this website 18 plus just for the sake of this. Then we want to make sure that the birth date is not empty, that the nationality requires a selection, and that the passwords not only meets at least 8 characters so that we don't allow them to put small passwords, but also we want to allow us to confirm that the password that they put in the confirm password is the same as this one. So in order to make a validation like that, we are going to be using TanStack Form. And to install TanStack Form inside of this project, I'm going to open up my terminal over here, and I want to run npm install at TanStack/React form. When I finish installing that, we can finally use it in my app. Now, this is going to work with any type of framework. It will work with Next.js if you want to use it as well, but I'm just using a simple Vite app in this example. Then what we want to do is we want to import at the top over here from at TanStack React form, and we want to import the useForm hook. So if you're familiar with other form libraries such as React Hook Form and even Formic, you might be used to this format where there's a hook called useForm, and whenever you want to validate a form and or handle a form in your application, you just call that hook. So I'm going to replace this use state that we have over here with the useForm call. So to use this hook, we have to define a form. So I'm going to set form is equal to useForm. And this is going to require us to pass an object. And this object allows us to pass the default values for this form. Now the default values is going to be similar to what we would put in the default value for the state representing the form. So I'm just going to replace this with this, and we should be good to go. So we're just saying that by default, the username is empty, the email is empty, the age is 0, and so on. Now we also want to assert that the form is going to have this type. So I'm going to copy the interface that we created over here, and I'm going to cast this value to be the value or the type of the interface. Then I'm going to delete the use state that we had before. Perfect. Now, the rest of the app is breaking, but that's fine. We don't need the handle change function anymore because that will be handled by TanStack form. Now the handle submit function over here, we can actually put it directly inside of the useForm hook. We set an onSubmit function over here, and it allows us to pass a callback function that can be async in case you need to make asynchronous requests, or it doesn't have to, which is what we will do in this case. And it allows you to access the form data through the arguments of this function. So by accessing the value over here, I can access the same type of form data as I did in this submit function. So I'll just copy this over here and I'll replace this with value. Value is basically what is the final state of the form when the user clicks the submit button. So what is the information that they put in the inputs? So we can delete this over here, and now we're almost there. Now you might be wondering, since we don't have the handle submit, what do we put on this on submit? Well, what you can put is you can put a callback function that will call the form.handle submit function. This is a function that will then call this over here, whatever you put on the on submit. And because we are calling this on submit, we do have to also prevent default so that the page doesn't refresh. So this is how you would handle this. Now let's go one by one. And I'll actually, for now, I'm going to comment out all of the other fields so that we can just work with one at a time and for it to make it easier for you guys to understand. Perfect. I just commented out all of the other fields and let's work with each of them individually. So first, how do we actually implement the form validation using TanStack form for this field? Well, first, in TanStack form, single input is represented by a forms field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out and we're going to work on it right below this. So to define a form field, we just use the form instance that we created and we say dot field. Now with a field component over here, we can pass the name of it similar to how we would pass to this input. So we can pass the name is username, but we won't pass the other things that we have over here. This is going to correspond to whatever value you passed in your form interface. So make sure that you align the names of the keys over here with the name of the fields that you put. Now, what you want to do is you want to access the field inside of this wrapped component. So the way you do this is you actually access it through a callback function that exists inside of here that is passed to the children. So you access this callback function and inside of it, you render the actual input that you want to display for this form field. So I'm talking about this over here. You can also put the div as well. Actually, I'll just copy this and I'll just put it inside of here. Now, what this will do is you'll have access to the field inside of this argument for this callback function. And this field can be used for multiple things. The first thing that it can be used for is you can access the value of this input currently in the form data. Now, previously we obviously used the state to do that, but now we can use that by just saying field.state.value. So you can access the current state of this input's value by using the field. Now, for the onChange, we don't have to handle that ourselves. The way we handle this is by, again, just accessing the field.handleChange function. Now, we do have to pass the value from this onChange, so I'm going to actually make this into an inline function that accesses the event, and I'm going to pass the event.target.value as an argument to this function, and TanStack form will know what to do with it. As you can see, it now allows us to enter stuff. So I'm going to put here a username, and it should allow us to submit. Now, obviously, it's submitted with everything being empty, but the username was registered. The problem is, I can still come over here and try to register an empty username, right? So how do we prevent that? Because we've defined this field in the form, but we haven't actually validated anything. Now, to validate this form field, you actually have to pass the validator prop to this field. So the validators over here takes in an object that will actually take in an onChange, and this onChange allows us to pass a callback function over here that returns some sort of Boolean condition of how we want to allow this input to be submitted or not. So what do I mean by that? Well, you can have the access to the current value that was typed by the user, so like the value of the actual input, through this argument of the function. And if I want to, for example, only keep allowing users to submit this input if the input is not empty, then what I can do is I can use this value over here, I can trim it, and I can check, is that value an empty string? Because if it is, then we want to apply some sort of validation. If not, then the validation will return undefined. By returning undefined, you're basically telling the validation that the input is good to go. So in this case, this is the bad case and this is the good case, right? Now, what do we put in case the value.trim is empty? So in case the user actually tries submitting with an empty input. Well, you put the error message that you want to display to the user. So for example, here I can put something in a string such as username is required. And now what I can do is I can actually display this error message by entering this div over here and directly accessing any errors that might have happened in this specific input. Now to access the error, we can use the field state. So I'll say field.state, and this will give us access to the meta and to errors. And if the length of errors, which is an array, is greater than 0, then we want to display those errors. But because they might be more than one, we might want to put a comma in between the errors. So it's a list of errors in case you want to put multiple validations in this, and we'll display them like this. I'm going to just put an em, and I'm going to say field.state.errors, and actually field.state.meta.errors, and I'm going to join each error with a comma and a space. So in case you have multiple, in this case, we're just going to have one. This means that if I try submitting this, which means that when we come over here and we try submitting, it shouldn't have actually showed that, which means we have an error. And I've already noticed, sorry about that. We have to return this Boolean over here. So now let's test it again. If I try clicking on the register function, it shouldn't submit the form and it should actually show the error message. Perfect. Now, if this actually showed multiple errors, it would show them separated by a comma and a space, so it looks pretty nice. Perfect. Now, let's continue building, but for the other form fields. So I'm going to delete this over here, and we already have the one for username. Now, how do we do the one for email? Well, for email, it's going to be very similar, but it's going to have a major difference. So the first thing is we want to change this to be email, and all of this stuff over here we want to change to email as well. So I'm going to actually copy the div for the email field that we had before, and I'm going to put it over here. Now it's going to give us an error because similar to what happened with the other input, these functions don't exist. So we're actually going to copy what we put for the value and the on-change on those inputs, and we're going to put them over here. Now the names keep the same because they're all based on the field, which changes depending on which form field it's inside of. So we don't have to worry about that. Now we'll also remove the name here because we're already defining the name up here. Now, for the email field, there's multiple things we might want to do. We might just want to prevent the user from submitting an empty email. We want to maybe just allow Gmail entries. I don't know. There's many possibilities. The best way to deal with handling emails is by using Regex. So Regex is not a topic I'm going to be teaching in this video because it's definitely not in the scope of this video, but it's basically a combination. It's you dictating strings, what string, like a validation for which strings pass a certain validation or not. So there's a common regex statement that checks for emails, which is this one over here. Now using this regex statement, what we can do is we can basically return that if the email regex doesn't pass the test. Now to do that, we just pass the value of what the user sent the email. And if it doesn't pass that, it means that the user didn't actually type something that looks like an email. So this regex will check to see if what the user typed looks exactly like what an email looks like, right? If it has a dot, if it has the @ symbol, and so on. Now, if it doesn't, then we probably want to say something like, please enter a valid email. And if it does actually match that, then the validation will be undefined, meaning that they passed. Now, I know again, if they try typing something that doesn't actually look like an email, by default, the email input will show that, but it's still good to have some sort of validation just in case. So if we put a valid email, it will actually allow the registration. Great. Now we can actually delete this over here and rush a little bit forward with the other two fields. The first name and the last name fields are going to be exactly like the username field. So I'm going to cut to after me doing it because they're just going to have the same validation as the username one. As you can see, the first name field looks like this, exactly like the username. It has the same names and everything. Now the thing is, we just changed what the validation returns over here. It says first name is required and last name is required. Also, we did forget to show the errors in the email field. So we definitely want to show the errors in case the email field fails as well. So we just copy that and paste. Now, one interesting thing about TanStack form, and you might have noticed, is that a lot of the things remain the same. The only thing that changes is the on-change in the validation and what you put to render the input over here. But for the rest, it actually looks very similar. Now, we're done with those over there. We get to another type of input, which is a number. How do we deal with age? Well, to do with age, we're actually going to copy this form field that we did for the last name, and we're going to paste it over here. We'll change this to age, and we'll also change this to be age and this to be age as well. Now, this already starts giving an error. Now, the reason why is because since we're using TypeScript and TanStack form works greatly with TypeScript, it already knows that value is not supposed to be a string. So it isn't supposed to access the trim function. It's a number. So this is not actually something that matters anymore. So we're going to delete this. And the type of validation we want to put for the age field is we want to make sure that the user who is signing in has an age above 18. Now, how do we do that? Well, we're going to return a Boolean that if the value is less than 18, then there's an issue. And we'll say something like, please be over 18. I mean, that sounded kind of weird, but you know what I mean, right? Please just be over the 18. And if not, then I'm going to put undefined. Now, let's change this to age. And we can also Oh yeah, so this one over here, we don't want to just pass value. This is important because remember, TanStack form works very greatly with TypeScript, meaning that value would technically be a string, right? Now, there's a great function we can use from the target called value as a number. And this will convert the value that we pass, since age is a number field, into an actual number. Now, we also might want to transform this, the type of this input, to be number as well, so that we get this cool little up and down arrows as well. You see, immediately when I try to make it below 18, it already showed the error message. Now we're done with this one. Let's try the date form. So I'm going to copy this. We're going to just paste it over here. And I'll delete this one as well. We'll just paste it here. Now for the date form, it's actually going to be, again, very similar. So I'm going to copy and paste how it's supposed to be, and I'll be back in a second. So as you can see, this is how the birthday field looks like. So it's basically, the only difference is that we changed the type to date, and also the fact that we want to set the value, if it's empty, to be equal to the birthday is required. So if we don't select a birthday, this is what's gonna happen. But then when we select it, then we can actually register, but obviously all the other ones are still giving us an error. Great. Now let's continue with the is married. The is married is a little bit different because it really doesn't need any validation, right? If you don't select the is married input, then basically you are not married. That's what we assumed. So what we have to do is we do have to convert all of this over here into the new field. I'm going to copy this information together with this div, and we're just going to put it directly over here. Now we want to change this, so we're going to get the same information as we did for the other items. So we'll just paste it over here. Now, one thing is, the difference is that with this checkbox, we actually put the label we wrap the input around with the label, and I'll put this over here. Now, there isn't any other validation, right? So there isn't any errors actually that this might actually occur. So I wouldn't worry that much. Actually, I could delete this. Now, for the value over here, it's also not value, it's checked, because this is a checkbox. Now, for this as well, we want to change this to checked. And if you want to skip validation for a specific form field, all you have to do is just return undefined. Perfect. We don't even need to access the value here. Now, for the nationality field, this is what it's going to look like. It's basically just going to have the options, as you can see, same as before, and we're just going to validate for if the thing is empty or not. Now, for the password field, we did something a bit different. We just checked in the Boolean if the length of the value is less than 8. That way we can ensure that the passwords that are inputted are actually bigger than 8 characters. If I were to try to type something like this, it will give us an error until I actually type more than 8 characters. Now I skipped this too, because at this point you guys should already understand, and I don't want to drag the video. But this last one, we're going to do it live, because this one will be, again, kind of different. For this one, we're going to copy the password field, but just so we can get kind of a structure. And we're going to change the name to confirm password here as well, and here as well. And the type will still be password. But the thing is, everything else will be the same. We'll just change this to confirm password. But the validation will be very different, because the validation we're doing to the confirm password input is that it matches this password field over here. And also we want to basically listen to the changes being made on that field, so that it actually, if we go back over here and fix, right, then the error that is showing saying that it's not matching will disappear. So to do something like this, what we have to do is we'll delete this over here. And we can actually access something else on this onChange function. We can access the field API. Now with the field API, we can basically access data from other fields, not just the confirm password field, which we can get the value from the value, right? Now what we can check is if the value is not equal to the field API, which we can then use to access the form and get a field value for another field. We do have to specify what field we want over here. So we put password. And if those two values are not the same, Then we say that we want the passwords do not match. And if they do match, then we just return undefined. Great. Now let's test this. I'll come here and I'm going to type password. Now at the bottom, I'm going to start typing password. But you see it says passwords don't match until I finally type password. Now the thing is, when I delete this, you see that the confirm password doesn't show the error again. Now the reason for that is because it is not actually listening to changes on this one. To actually make that happen, we can add another property to the validators called onChangeListenTo, which is really cool. I haven't seen this in React Hook form, I believe. So we can say that this will listen to changes in different fields in the form. More specifically, we want to listen to the changes in the password field, because now if I save this and I start typing, you'll see that it will detect that the passwords don't match, even though I'm not currently typing on this field over here. Great. Now we're pretty much done with the form validation for this form. I can actually try to succeed here. I'm going to write PedroTech. Now I'm going to write a generic email. Now for the name, I'll just say Pedro Machado. I'll put my age, which I think it's 23. Then birth date, I'll just put whatever. Then I am indeed not married, but I'll just put I'm married. I'm from Brazil. Then password, I'm just going to type password. And for confirm, I'm making sure I'm also typing password. And if the validation is correct, I should click register and we should see this information showing over here. Great. See how simple it is for you to set up some form validation using TanStack form. Honestly, I've enjoyed this library so far. It's been released for a week, and I think it is a lot more cleaner than something like Formic or React Hook form, which, by the way, I think is barely maintained. The creators of React Hook form have already mentioned that it is an old library, and there hasn't been a lot of innovation with regards to it. And TanStack form, together with the whole TanStack ecosystem, does have a lot of innovation. Now, before we get out of this video, I just want to show you guys a quick example on how you would actually use a validation schema library with TanStack form. So we are doing validations very easily by just using this onChange, right? But the thing is, honestly, I wouldn't do it this way, because there are a lot of good schema libraries that are very popular that you can use to define the validation for your form. Some example of them, there is Yup, there's Zod, and there's Valibot, and so on. So what I want to do is I want to show you guys how this specific form would look like if instead of doing the validations on the onChange over here, we actually did it using Zod. So if you're interested in using Zod or any other validation schema library, this is an example of how you would do this. In this example, we're using Zod and we're having the same form. Now, what you do is you set up the schema for your validation, which in this case, I use Zod. As you can see, I use the same error messages and just use Zod functions to define the schema and do the validation. And then at the end, when you set up the useForm, and then in the end, when you set up the useForm, you just pass a validators field in the useForm, and you set the onChange to be the schema that you made from Zod or from Yup or whatever. Now, on the onSubmit, you keep it the same, but the important difference is that now you don't pass a validator to any of the form fields. They will remain clean and empty because all of the validation is done in this schema, which, by the way, you can put in a different file. Obviously, this looks kind of ugly. It's how I usually do it. But yeah. So this is how you would work with other validation schema libraries. So this is basically it. If you enjoyed this quick tutorial on how to use TanStack form, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. I know I've been making a lot of videos where I just build projects, so it is a good refresher and a good break for me to actually make a simple tutorial, which is what my channel is used to, like this one. And I had to make it because TanStack form got just released. I was waiting for it to get out of beta, just like how I'm waiting for TanStack start to get out of beta so I can make a full-on crash course on it. I was really excited. I was already using TanStack form. So yeah, this is a great library. I'm probably going to be using this for the rest of the next few years until I see another better option, and I think you guys should as well. So thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, and I see you guys next time.